Good morning and welcome to the ABC's special coverage of Anzac Day commemorations in the Northern Territory. I'm Amy Colpert. We're broadcasting this morning across ABC TV, radio and our Facebook page for coverage of the street parade, which will shortly get underway in the Darwin CBD. And joining me this morning is Major Elizabeth McFarlane and Warrant Officer 2 Paul Stiles. Good morning. Thank you so much for your time and your expertise today. You've both been long-serving members of the Defence Force. You're currently still serving. We saw a great turnout this morning at the dawn service in Darwin. Looking at the street parade that's about to begin, there's a huge crowd in Darwin CBD as well. As serving officers, how much does it mean to see that show of support from the public on days like Anzac Day?
Good morning, Amy. Thank you for having us both in the studio this morning. It's incredible. So places like Darwin, it's a real community event. We're very lucky to be serving up in the north, and it reflects the support we have from the Darwin community. It means a lot for those in uniform, but to our families as well, and the veterans that still live up in Darwin. It's incredible.
And Paul, you have been in Darwin serving for a very long time now. Is it still as significant after all these years to see that public support?
It is, Amy. I'm very proud of the history and of sacrifice and service of the Australian Defence Force, and I feel a great deal of gratitude to that expression of community pride and recognition of that service and sacrifice as well.
Well, the crowds have turned out, as I said, and if we turn to the street parade now, which has just begun at the top of Nucky Street, we can see the huge crowds out on the street. I tell you what, it was a pretty warm morning as well, so it's amazing to see so many people turn out on what is, I think, about 28 degrees and 85% humidity in Darwin at the moment. It's a bit sweaty compared to other places in the country.
It is, Amy. It was a bit steamy at the dawn service this morning, but that sun is out, so it's a beautiful day for the Anzac Day parade.
Now, we're just having a look now at Nucky Street, which is right through the middle of Darwin City. We can see leading the march today is the NT Police Force. They're making sure it's all clear for the people taking part. And straight after them, as with tradition, the Whaler Horse is beginning the march. Now that sort of signals the start of this, what will be a great parade today.
Yes, definitely. So it's the Whaler Horse has led the march. I think this is the third year in a row. So it's fantastic to have that tradition continued and acknowledge the fallen horseman by that empty saddle on the horse.
Now, as that parade makes its way down, we will see a closer shot of the horse soon, the Whaler Horse. Now, each year, as is with tradition, we see a pair of riding boots worn backwards. That's a mark of respect for fallen horsemen, obviously especially special on a day like Anzac Day. And that's a bit of a nod to military tradition out the front of the march. Is that right, Elizabeth?
Yes, that's correct. So this parade will be full of traditions and customs you'll see from across all tri-service, so ADF complete, as well as some of our international partners that are marching today.
That is an absolutely gorgeous horse, led by Jeanette Wilson. Now, as we can see, just behind the horse, we have some military vehicles, 6 in fact, and this is for disabled veterans. Now, these veterans are from conflicts from World War II right through to present-day conflicts, and they're riding in the military vehicles. Included in that group is 98-year-old Mr. Colin Hurd, or he'll be 98 next month rather, and he was a fighter pilot in 82 Squadron in World War II. There's several other veterans as well riding there. Paul, how important is it that all personnel who want to take part in marches like this are able to?
I think it's reflective of that concept of mateship within the Australian Defence Force, that you always want to make sure that everybody is brought along, and this is always an important part of that these less sprightly veterans are still with us and participating.
Oh, we can hear the crowd giving him a clap now. It's lovely to hear, isn't it? There is such a huge showing of support out there. Hundreds at least, I'd say probably thousands of people who have come down to Darwin City for this. Oh, look, we can see marching after that. There was the Gallipoli torch, and then that I believe is the Darwin City Brass Band. And that is a huge sea of white behind them. That is amazing to see, isn't it? It's quite a spectacular showing.
Yes, there's a significant number of members of the Royal Australian Navy marching in Darwin today. I think we're looking over 1,000, Paul, if we recall. So it's incredible to see the white heading down the street now.
That is a crisp white uniform. Are you glad you don't have to keep that clean?
I personally am.
In other areas of defence, yes. Which is lovely to see. So the old military vehicles, they are absolutely fantastic.
And Amy, the Gallipoli torch was just in that.
Oh, we just saw a glimpse of it then, which is wonderful. Of course, Gallipoli, such an important part of Anzac Day history. Have either of you had the opportunity to ever go to Gallipoli? I mean, that would be pretty amazing, wouldn't it? So.
Yes, I haven't, no, but it's definitely on the list.
It's on your list, yeah. Oh, there we go. We see the Gallipoli torch there. It's doing well. It's a bit windy out there for that march, I think. So
it is.
And staying alight, which is good to see.
It's a Sergeant R.J. Martin, so from the 1st Combat Signal Regiment, is there as the torchbearer, which is an incredible honour to be given that appointment for the march this morning.
That is beautiful to see. Okay, so we've got our naval forces coming now, and I believe they're from HMAS Coonawarra, which is in Darwin City.
And also HMAS Adelaide, because she's visiting Darwin at the moment. Significant visit for her because it's the first time she's been here since Navy's new wharf at Larrakia Defence Precinct came into service, and she's tied up alongside for the first time.
And well, I guess visiting military as well, is it lovely that they get to take part in our commemorations here? I mean, it's something very different for them. I guess that's part of the joy of being in the service. You never know where you're going to be on any given day, is that right?
Yes.
Yes, it's for many it may be the first time they're visiting Darwin, and definitely maybe a first Anzac Day in Darwin for some. So it's wonderful that they can partake in the march this morning.
And I imagine, we did mention the weather, I imagine if they've come from Adelaide, it's coming into winter there, so quite a different experience for them than what they might have seen elsewhere around the country. Now, Elizabeth, I think you mentioned you've taken part in marches before, not in Darwin, elsewhere, is that right?
No, I haven't been fortunate enough to march in Darwin, but I've been involved in marches in Canberra and Sydney and even Melbourne when I was conducting my training down there, which are all unique and just incredible opportunities to be involved in.
And what about yourself, Paul? Have you ever had the chance to take part in one of these marches?
Certainly in Darwin, but more often in more remote places around the territory in my time with Norforce, with catafalque parties at Jabiru and Timber Creek, and everywhere that the Australian Defence Force is, there will have been a dawn service this morning throughout the territory, and Kimberley, Norforce was present at about 16 different dawn services this morning.
That is actually incredible. Now, Darwin is, of course, our biggest march in the Northern Territory, and the dawn service in Darwin also the biggest. But is it? I guess it's a different experience in some of those other smaller places when you take part in those dawn services.
It is. It's a much more intimate experience, I suppose, because it is a smaller community. You're much closer among the community. Special occasions.
Yeah. Special for different reasons with different crowd sizes. No less significant though, I'm sure. Now, look, we did mention that this is the Navy, you're both with the armed forces. Is there much of a crossover between the different areas of defence?
Certainly becoming more and more. The concept of joint operations is much more. And you'll see here with the HMAS Adelaide crew going through, quite a lot of Army uniforms. One of Adelaide's roles is to be able to transport troops and equipment, and so it has an Army detachment always on board operating different functions of the vessel.
So not really a them and us. It's not a competitive environment anymore. More of one team across the whole of the defence.
That's it, Amy. So a joint approach to how we exercise, train, and operate.
And that is Navy. We will have the Air Force involved today too. We're going to have some flyovers coming up shortly, which will be amazing to see. So all three of our defence forces represented here. And just looking at that crowd again, I mean, it is at least 10 deep there. That is such a great turnout for Darwin. It is a small city, but it just shows we're a military town, aren't we? So to see that public support, isn't that absolutely fantastic? Okay, now coming next, I think we have the Darwin RSL contingent. This is being led by Jeff Dunn. Now this has a lot of different age groups marching. Some family members marching on behalf of loved ones who have passed away. They're wearing their medals or are too old to take part. But we also have former serving members who are marching with the RSL. And the reason for the age difference is it's from all different experiences they've had in wartime, isn't that right?
That's correct, Amy.
Yeah. And we can see there lots of medals being worn proudly, which is wonderful to see. Now, included in this march day, I believe up the front was 12-year-old Georgia Vukalos. Now, she was wearing her great-grandfather's medals. Sadly, he died 2 years ago. He was 99 years old, and she's very, very proud to be marching with the RSL contingent today. I think we've got the Legacy coming through now. Of course, Legacy, a huge support of veterans' families for a very long time now. Anzac Day is a huge fundraising opportunity for them. And that's great to see them taking part in the march as well.
Yeah.
Definitely, Legacy is very important for our families, for those that maybe injured or ill or not return home for whatever reason. And I think the NT is very lucky. We've got legatees in Darwin, in Catherine and in Alice Springs, so that network itself is incredible up here.
So that's very important, I guess, for people who are serving to know that sort of establishment exists to support family members.
Yeah. And this is Legacy's 101st year.
That is amazing, 101 years. Okay,
and this is the Norforce and Nakaroo Association.
Excellent. Now, I'll let you talk about this, Paul, because obviously Norforce is your specialty. That's the area you work in for a very long time. Do you know a lot of the people who are taking part in the march today?
Absolutely. So that is both former Norforce members and current serving Norforce members. The Nakaroo and Norforce Association, the name is Nakarooza from our heritage-linked unit from the Second World War, the 2nd 1st North Australia Reserve Unit. And the association still carries the Nakaroo, the North Australia Reserve Unit banner on all of the parades to keep their presence alive.
That is fantastic. And Paul, like you have been, I mentioned, with Norforce a long time. How long exactly have you been with Norforce for?
Since 1988.
Oof. 30, what's that, 36? 36? Oh, you don't look old enough to have served there that long, Paul. So has it changed much over that time?
The technology has changed. The job is the same. And in fact, the job is almost the same as it was for the Nakaroos in the Second World War.
Well, it's really a mix, isn't it, of old and new, isn't it, now, Norforce, using some of those really age-old traditions of patrolling and preparing for war in that sense. Isn't that great? Yeah. Okay, so we can still see the Legacy marching past there. I think after Legacy was the A Battery, which is Australia's oldest continuously serving military unit. So 1871 A Battery was established. That is absolutely incredible. Now, I think I mentioned you've both been long-serving members. In my mind, 51 years combined service, pretty significant. When you first signed up, did you imagine you'd still be doing it as long as you have been? Was it always a long-term plan for you, or you just didn't know, I guess?
I think that's the right answer. I didn't know. I had no intention of it being any particular length of time, and I still have always a positive feeling about going into work.
Well, that is wonderful. I guess a part of the appeal or a way of keeping people is there's so many opportunities to move around, isn't there, in defence?
There is. There's one career in many jobs in the ADF, so you never know what you're going to end up doing, like this morning, finding ourselves in the studio with yourself, Amy. But no, I absolutely love my job and have been fortunate enough to have some incredible postings around the country. So
when you signed up, you didn't expect yourself to be a TV?
No, not at all. No. Wasn't on the list, man. So
wasn't on the bucket list, but you can tick it off now anyway.
That's it. Thanks, Amy.
We do want to say a huge thank you to our two guests, Major Elizabeth McFarlane for joining us this morning, as well as Warrant Officer 2 Paul Stiles. They have taken time out of their Anzac Day to help us talk through this march today. Now we can see a sea of khaki coming through now. The uniforms being worn today, are they special march uniforms, or is that everyday sort of gear?
This is very much ceremonial dress.
Oh yeah, very good.
Being led by the band of the 1st Brigade, and notably it's largely a band of reserve musicians.
Oh really?
There's about 3 full-time members in the band, and they are probably one of the busiest units we have up here. They have a very busy schedule supporting a lot of our ceremonial activities, so it's wonderful to have them on parade today. As
someone who's not musical, I mean, I imagine it's hard enough playing an instrument in a seated position, let alone having to march in time as well. They do an incredible job, don't they?
They do, yes. They're fantastic team up here.
I know there'll be a few people watching who are very excited to see these gorgeous dogs taking part as well. Are they military dogs, we
yes,
imagine? Military
working dogs. I can't quite pick out the hat badges of those leading them to know whether they are, although I expect they would be military working dogs from 1st Combat Engineer Regiment.
Elizabeth, now you are with 1st Brigade, is that right?
That's correct,
in your everyday work,
yes.
And they're taking part today as well?
Yeah, so that form body you can see, that's the headquarters of the 1st Brigade are leading the March for Army today, and we also have members of 5 RAR, so from the 5th Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment, The battalion has had a very busy couple of years.
I'm just going to cut you off there shortly, Elizabeth. We can see the helicopters coming now. We will come back to the 1st Brigade, I promise. So these are ARH Tiger helicopters that are flying over the city now. Oh, we can hear the noise from them. That is spectacular to see. They're only 30 metres high, so pretty low to the crowds there. I mean, that would be quite an experience being underneath those, I imagine.
Definitely,
Yes.
to have the Tigers up here. Another very unique experience for Darwin this morning.
Do you still, you've been in defence a long time, do you still love seeing things like the helicopters, like the military aircraft going overhead at things like this?
Yes.
They're pretty cool, hey?
Yeah.
Never gets old, Amy. It's incredible.
That is amazing. Okay, so back to these members marching now. So that looks like a pretty big crowd. Do we know how many, or is it just...
I think the full battalion was on parade this morning.
Full battalion.
Yeah, so...
minus you.
Yeah. I'm not in the 5th Battalion, but...
That's the 5th.
Yeah, but you would have seen on the dais there, it's the commander of the 1st Brigade, so Brigadier Doug Patch. He was the reviewing officer for the parade today, and he took over command of the brigade at the start of this year. So it's wonderful to have him on the dais for his first Anzac Day as the commander of the 1st Brigade.
That is incredible to see so many people marching down now. I mean, this might seem like a silly question. Does it take much practice to get the marching down pat like that?
Not for 5R, I'm sure. They're well drilled on marching down for Anzac Day. But I'd say the 5th Battalion Royal Australian Regiment have been extremely busy in the last few years. They had the key contingent from Darwin that went over to Operation Kudu. So we're supporting the Ukrainian Armed Forces and training so in the United Kingdom. So there's a lot of members who'll be marching for the first time since returning from those operations, and they should be extremely proud of all they achieved while over there.
I think the public is certainly proud of them today. And now when we see so many officers and military people taking part, is that something that if someone serving wanted to take part, would they be able to, or is it more of a certain assigned areas that get the opportunity to take part in marches like this?
It's very variable, Amy. It depends on the tasks that the unit may have underway at any particular point in time. If a lot of the unit is away on operations, then they'll have a lesser presence. It will be stronger if it's a quieter period for the unit.
Now, we mentioned that was the 5th Battalion. They actually have a very active part in sort of wartime engagement, I guess. Is that really the role of that group?
Yes, that is one of their key functions. They'll also do a lot of work with the Marine rotation that's arrived here in Darwin. We can now see them in shot, so they'll be preparing to conduct some major exercises with them in the next few months now that we're in the dry season. So they'll be very busy in working on the interoperability piece with our partners from the United States.
Now, I think ahead of the Marines there, is that the Air Force we have marching?
It is.
That looks like the Air Force to me, yep.
Yeah, so key units there today, 13 Squadron Royal Australian Air Force, which is the squadron which operates RAF Base Darwin. And they're actually number 13 City of Darwin Squadron, formed in the Second World War initially and for service in Darwin. And in accordance with Air Force tradition, have retained that name of City of Darwin.
They're ours, if you like.
They're ours.
That is, the blue looks great too, and they've got some of their working dogs going along as well. We see as people do pass through the middle of the street, they are giving a salute. Is that to some senior officers who are watching on? Is that?
Yes. The saluting stand we've seen a couple of times now. It's with the senior reviewing officer, the commander of the 1st Brigade, but also the senior officer from Marine Rotational Force Darwin is there with him. And among the Air Force contingent as well, aviators from number 114 Mobile Control and Reporting Unit, a radar unit, continuing the very long tradition of Air Force radar units serving in the Northern Territory, starting from mid-1942 and continuously right through to today.
Darwin does, of course, have such a rich military history, not only history but also presence. We're really a bit of a military town, aren't we? So, and not just for one specific area of the military. It's Air Force, it's Army, it's also Navy. So that's good to see everyone taking part. We have got the Marines coming down now. Look, Australia has a great history with the US forces, but the Marines more recently stationed in the Northern Territory, and that is, by the looks of it, a reasonable sized group who's taking part in the march today. They'd have their own traditions in America that similar to, but different to Anzac. Obviously not Anzac, they're not Australian or New Zealander, but...
Yes. I suppose a not uncommon thing across the Western world, and certainly veterans organisations not dissimilar to the RSL as well. And US military with really strong connections with Darwin. During the first bombing raid on Darwin in 1942, a very significant loss of life among US personnel here at the time with the loss of fighter aircraft and pilots in the first air raid and the sinking of the USS Peary with quite significant loss of life on board. And at the time as well, there were 2 US National Guard artillery regiments here who had been going to reinforce Timor but came back to Darwin and continued serving in Darwin for some months.
And they're on 6 monthly rotations at the moment, the
Yes.
US Marines. So do you see them much around the place where you're based?
Yes, we do. So the 1st Combat Signal Regiment does do a lot of work with their communications element. So everything from our physical training sessions in the morning through to exercising over the next few months. It's a great opportunity and definitely a unique aspect of being posted to the 1st Brigade.
So we can see some Navy personnel walking there. We did see...
Yeah, so that's actually contingents from Australian Defence Force cadets, Navy cadets, Army cadets, Air Force cadets.
Oh, so this is all the cadets that we can
Yes.
see on our screen right now walking?
Yeah.
And I suppose is that how you get your start? Everyone starts through the cadets? Is that pretty much the pathway in? Or?
I didn't start in cadets,
Yeah.
Amy, but it's a very common pathway that people get exposed to the organisation through the cadets, and they do fantastic work, getting exposed to some adventure training and the customs and traditions of the different services.
And I guess, what did make you get your start? What made you decide to sign up in the first place?
I'm very fortunate. My father's also a serving member, so I grew up with, I'm 3rd generation, so I grew up with a dad also in Army, so I had that exposure growing up, which was incredible to be part of as a child as well.
That's so wonderful. And what about yourself, Paul? A few years ago now, but what made you decide to sign up?
It is a long time ago, Amy, and sometimes it's hard to recall, but there wasn't a really strong family tradition of service. I mean, there was World War II service, but I think it was more, I saw it as an exciting career, but one where there was contribution as well. And that was a motivating factor in it, that opportunity to provide service to the country.
We've got another a band turning the corner now. This is a marching band from the Defence Force. Do we know who this is?
Again, that's the band of the 1st Brigade.
That's the same. Yep, wonderful. Okay, we are nearing the end of the parade now. I think we've got just at the front of the screen at the top there the Girl Guides and Boy Scouts marching as well. Great to see some of the younger generations getting to take part in a celebration like today. It would be very exciting for them to see the huge crowds cheering them on. Absolutely. And a common theme, obviously, through today being Anzac, we've seen a lot of Australian flags, some New Zealand flags as well. And it's so wonderful to see the crowd turn out and really get behind our troops on what is a very special occasion indeed. And we can just see the final part of the march wrapping up now. What did you think? I mean, that was pretty special to see so many people taking part, wasn't it?
Yes, the scale of that, Amy, for Darwin is just incredible to have so many service personnel and the families for those that weren't in uniform, a lot of veterans there, which is just wonderful to make sure they're still included in today's activities.
Now, Paul, we did speak during the march of your connection to Norforce here in the top end. I mean, what is it about Norforce that is unique, and what is it that made you stay with your role in Norforce for so long?
So Norforce is one of 3 regional force surveillance units in the Army. They're what Army refers to as a special purpose unit. Where we live and train is where we conduct the enduring information collection tasks that we have all the time, essentially maintaining information in a military context about all of Northern Australia. the Regional Force Surveillance Group that covers those 3 units covers from Innisfail in Queensland to Geraldton in Western Australia. Norforce, about 600 soldiers, 240 of those from remote communities. And the job that we do in peacetime, out there in very remote areas, collecting information and participating in border protection operations in support of Australian sovereignty, is essentially the same job that we would do in conflict. It is an unusual situation for the Army that it's not that we're here in Australia and we're training for something that might happen. We're here in Australia and training for that, but also already doing that job in the place that we would do that job in conflict.
Now, you mentioned the remote communities. Norforce has a very special connection with Indigenous culture and Indigenous representatives. How long has that been going for? Since Norforce started?
Yes. So Norforce is about knowing about Northern Australia, and you can only do that if you have people in the unit from all over the Northern Territory and the Kimberley, which means we need to recruit people from remote communities. Very much a case of Army going to remote communities and saying, we need your help. And so we have a lot of soldiers from remote communities enlisted in a particular category of service that provides for service just in Norforce. And the first of that training for those started back the very first year of the unit, 1981, alongside our mainstream training of recruits at the same time. Different locations, different courses. The first course was conducted at Kimbolton Station in the Kimberley in Western Australia, a very remote part of Western Australia, and continues today. We're about to start our next recruiting round next week for soldiers from remote communities, people coming into Darwin for assessment and enlistment and start their recruit training.
And there's no mucking around, is there? You sign up and straight into the training at the moment?
Yes.
Next week, is that right?
Yes, they do the assessment process with ADF careers next week. Those that are successful will enlist on Friday in the morning and start their recruit training on Friday afternoon.
That is absolutely incredible. Well, on Norforce, our reporter Matt Garrick spent time with the Norforce team out in the field. He takes a look for us now at how Australia's vast northern borders are still being defended by squadrons of soldiers using techniques that are thousands of years old. And as global tensions rise and the Commonwealth spends billions to pivot its defence forces north, we look at how Norforce's role has never been more vital.
The Zodiac hums to life.
Another thumbs up there, Axel.
And they're off, shooting across the sea in some of Australia's most wild and inhospitable country.
We have to be fully self-sufficient, so carrying a lot of water, a lot of food and being able to live off the land where possible. Taking into account that there is a number of flora and fauna threats out here. There's obviously saltwater crocodiles within the area, which are larger than our Zodiacs, longer than our Zodiacs.
In a secret location on the Northern Territory coast, these Norforce soldiers scan the horizon for illegal activity, from foreign fishing boats to drug drops, as part of a live defence mission named Operation Resolute. In times of war, they'd also be searching for invading forces.
Our job is to look out for vessels that shouldn't be around here without no permit. They could be bringing drugs into the community.
Norforce's unique strength, its First Nations patrolmen, equipped with deep knowledge of this environment to survive for days or weeks on a mission, at times hunting for food or preventing the squadrons becoming a meal themselves.
Back at home, I've been going like hunting for turtle. That's why I'm used to seeing turtle trap from a long way far. I can tell it's a turtle.
Many of these patrolmen and women have links to Norforce lasting generations. For Tiwi Islander Bronson Manatopi, his father was a Norforce patrolman who died too early, and wearing the uniform keeps his memory alive.
Wanted to follow the footstep, my dad's footstep. Yeah.
The origins of Norforce date back to the Second World War, where 2 volunteer units, the Knackaroos and the Northern Territory Special Reconnaissance Unit, manned this frontier front line against encroaching Japanese soldiers who'd been waging bombing raids across the north.
Those soldiers back in World War II were crossing that same terrain on horseback, having to carry all their supplies, going out for months at a time.
Defence says it prides itself on the relationships built between remote NT communities and its Norforce squadrons, but concede there was a period of deep distrust after soldiers were sent into the territory during John Howard's 2007 federal intervention, an attempt to stamp out social issues like alcohol and child abuse.
It's part of our history that there was a period of turbulence there, but I think that the key is the basis of that relationship was able to withstand that period.
On Operation Resolute, these historic fault lines aren't easily visible as these patrolmen and women work together, pushing further and further into this hostile but spectacular landscape.
Ada nakon team na yulngo team na por ana squadron ngor maybe nakon napto teach yulngon mala no ko nakon or hunting or make space or how to get nowhere bush medicine or bush tucker. Once road, this is one.
As Australia's Defence Force pivots to the north, authorities believe this Norforce squadron is now more pivotal than ever in the nation's efforts to protect the northern borders.
The dynamics of the world are shifting at the moment, and it's important that we're just very conscious of the north. We need to look at it with a lens that is consistent with how people have been looking at this landscape for thousands of years and work with it rather than against it.
Defending against a changing world from a landscape untouched for millennia.
You're watching the ABC's special coverage of Anzac Day commemorations. Joining me in the studio today is Major Elizabeth McFarlane and also Warrant Officer Class 2 Paul Stiles. Paul, we just saw that story on Norforce. Can you tell me, is that a pretty regular sort of patrol that the team would do?
It is, Amy, and there are two aspects really to our work. That pictured one of our patrols participating in Operation Resolute task, and Operation Resolute is the ADF's contribution to border protection, surveillance across Northern Australia. But almost exactly the same is the regular information collection tasks that we undertake throughout the year, so that really almost continuously through the year there will be Norforce elements somewhere across the Northern Territory and the Kimberley out in the bush doing that sort of work.
And Elizabeth, we did mention that you were with the 1st Brigade. Could you tell us a little bit about what your role with Defence is?
Yes, definitely, Amy. So I'm currently the Officer Commanding of the 104th Signal Squadron. So it's a key communications node within the 1st Brigade. We're responsible for making sure that the Brigade Commander, the Battle Group Commanders, so those key command elements can talk to each other in the tactical environment. So it's a very busy job, but very rewarding. We've had wonderful opportunities to integrate with the Marines and also support the Air Force, Navy or other call signs from the Army.
And is it really interesting to see how those other areas sort of do their jobs, I guess, and how it intertwines?
Yes, definitely. I think we had that discussion about that joint approach to operating. We learn a lot when we operate and exercise with our partners, but also internal to the ADF. There's a lot to be learnt from how we do our jobs.
Well, now we're going to have a look at how the Australian Army is undergoing a major change in how it trains soldiers in Darwin to be ready to serve within the Indo-Pacific region. The Army's focus on training in and around shallow water is part of a shift in the nation's defence strategy, but experts say it shouldn't be seen as a direct response to China's military build-up. Evelyn Manfield went along.
On the Tiwi Islands, just north of Darwin, the Australian Defence Force is changing how it trains, moving from land-based training to in and around shallow waters.
We've seen a fundamental change in where our focus is.
The training previously prepared troops for conflict in Afghanistan, but will now focus on the Indo-Pacific region, where troops would need to navigate beaches and islands, a similar program to that undertaken by US Marines.
With the increasing contested environment that the world is finding itself in, using the 1st Brigade as Australia's primary interactor inside the archipelagic region to our north provides a number of really good options for our government.
We still are infantry soldiers, however we're just adapting to do this in the environment and the geography we live in.
The change involves managing operations from the water too. This floating command post is an essential part of the 1st Brigade's shallow water operation, and it can also act as a bit of a bridge. Parts of it can fold out, allowing them to transport personnel and equipment across water.
The shift is part of the Defence Strategic Review, which discusses China's military build-up, saying it's occurring without transparency or reassurance to the Indo-Pacific region. But one think tank cautions against drawing conclusions, as this change also enables the ADF to better provide humanitarian aid.
Certainly we shouldn't draw any direct conclusions between China's increasing military build-up and this being a specific response to that.
The Army says the changes could lead to a greater presence in Darwin, with more personnel being assigned to serve in the top end.
Elizabeth, we were just speaking about your role with Defence. That's actually your squadron that was in that package, is that right?
That's correct, Amy. There's some footage there from the headquarters we deployed on the quarry there as part of exercise Predator's Walk last year, just trying to test and see how we can provide communications in the littoral environment, which was a great challenge to have.
And is it different, that water training we just saw? Is that a new approach?
Yes, it is. For the communicators, we're very comfortable operating on land, so now that we're pushing to littoral operations, there's a lot of challenges and great opportunities that come with that.
Now, that's sort of a specialised exercise that took place last year. Is that the sort of thing you'd been involved in quite regularly?
Yeah, so in the 1st Brigade we do exercise quite frequently at that scale, so we are about to, as the dry season kicks off, so does the exercise period. So we'll be quite busy for the next few months with the preparations for the exercise Predator's Walk and Run in the next few months.
And whereabouts are you based, your squadron?
Out at Robertson Barracks.
And I believe this morning we had coverage of the dawn service here, but there was a special dawn service at Robertson Barracks as well?
Yeah, so the 1st Combat Signal Regiment and Headquarters 1st Brigade hosted a joint dawn service at the headquarters there, which was wonderful. So there's a lot of soldiers that live on base there and a lot of young families that for the first time were able to gather together for the Anzac Day dawn service.
I mean, we've always recognised Anzac Day as being a really special day for members of the public to be able to appreciate the Defence Forces. Is it a special day for people who are serving as well? Like, does it really hold some special significance?
Yes, definitely. I think Paul touched on it before. We're very proud of our service, and so it's a great opportunity to stop and reflect on our commitment to service to the nation, but also the sacrifices that our families and friends make along the way, because it's everyone's involved. If you're a part of the ADF, it's a big sacrifice for families too.
I imagine it would be. And as Australians remember the sacrifice of the Anzacs, the top end reflects on its sacrifice in World War II. For more than 50 years, Darwin's Military Museum has been telling the story of the hundreds of civilians and soldiers who gave their lives. Lillian Rangier looks back at its history.
A monument of peace on a site of war. At the former fortifications in East Point, Darwin's Military Museum remembers the Territorians who died in World War II, when bombs rained down on the top end.
We have people, visitors that come here, and when they learn about the story, some of them are reduced to tears.
But that wasn't always the case.
East Point in the mid to late 60s was literally going to rack and ruin.
After helping defend Darwin through 64 Japanese air raids, the East Point command post was eventually abandoned after World War II. Until a group of veterans saw an opportunity to pay respect to their fallen colleagues.
But also to commemorate those Territorians that left the Northern Territory to fight, and many of them die in the First World War.
And so the Darwin Military Museum was born in 1969.
So this gun emplacement, as I say, is one of the originals from the Second World War. It's a part of the Darwin Military Museum now.
The collection has grown to 5,000 objects and artefacts, documenting Australia's participation in conflicts from the Boer War until today. This site is what's known as a battlefield museum. It's built on the ground that soldiers themselves would have walked. Now the structures that were once instrumental to Darwin's defence preserve its history for generations to come.
The rest of Australia that didn't know that Darwin got bombed until well after the war, it's an important thing for them to come up and see that here.
And it's keeping history alive for locals too.
One lady came in and said she'd saw her grandfather in the movie. That was quite emotional for her, things like that.
As you go around and you're cleaning and what have you, so, oh, I haven't seen this before. And you learn things all the time.
In the former war zone, one message rings loud.
And we encourage people to come and ring the bell for peace.
Helping to preserve that legacy for years to come.
It is an absolutely incredible legacy up here in the top end. You've both obviously been to the Military Museum. Yes. The amount of memorabilia is absolutely incredible there, isn't it?
It's very impressive, Amy, and I was actually surprised when we went through the museum for the first time when we posted up here, and it was incredible to see how much history is stored and proudly on display at the museum.
Now, Paul, you are a long-term Territorian. Elizabeth, slightly newer. I think, was it a year and a half that you've been up here now for? Is Darwin a good place to be posted? Were you happy when you got the call up?
Definitely. It's a wonderful place to be posted. This is where you get to do some of the best soldiering, the best training. The conditions are tough, especially with the heat and the humidity, but it is wonderful. Life is fantastic up in Darwin when you're posted up here.
And what about you, Paul? Obviously you like it, you've stayed this long, but are you happy to be here?
I am. In my civilian employment, when I first came to Darwin, I was supposed to be here for 3 weeks, and it's almost 40 years later and I haven't left yet. The Territory, I find, is always a sense of, it is a place where there is always a sense that positive things can happen, and that hasn't changed for me all the time here. That every now and then there'll be peaks and troughs, but it's such a place that feels to have a positive future.
And do you feel very lucky that you've been able to stay? I mean, a lot of being in the army is those postings and having to move around. You've had the privilege of being sort of in this Norforce position for a number of years now. Do you feel lucky, I guess?
Well, in my case, Amy, almost all of my a very large part of my service has been as a reserve member. In recent years, I've completed a number of full-time service contracts for 1, 2 or 3 years. But I'm a reserve member, so as long as I stay living in the place, I will stay posted to a unit here, almost always. So it's a case for reservists of you tend to be a little bit more in control of your career.
A slightly different story for you, Elizabeth.
It is.
You've had a few postings in your time, is it?
I have. I've been very lucky to be posted around the country. I've spent a couple of years up in Townsville, in Melbourne and Sydney, and out in Canberra, of course, so we head back there. So Anzac Day may be a bit different next year, a bit cooler in Canberra, but Darwin has been by far one of the best experiences we've had.
Well, speaking of Darwin, every 2 years the skies of the top end fill with the familiar roar of more than 100 military aircraft as Air Force pilots from all over the world take part in exercise Pitch Black. And after more than 40 years, the training has grown to one of the largest defence exercises in the country.
I'm Air Commodore Tim Alsop. I was the commander for Exercise Pitch Black 2022. Well, the Northern Territory is pretty unique as a training environment. When you look at it from a global perspective, it's the size of a European nation, and that allows us to have the freedom to create challenging training scenarios that can involve up to 100 aircraft from around the world.
It's always great to be back flying in Australia. It's such an honour to be in this place.
Exercise Pitch Black is designed to test what we call high-end air combat power. So that's bringing together a very large number of very advanced aircraft, fighter aircraft, strike aircraft, aircraft that provide us command and control, and providing the crews with very challenging problems to solve. An example of that might be that we have a hostage situation where we need to get a special forces team in to recover them in a very hostile, fictional environment. And that means that they have to spend a day at least planning how to approach the problem to safely get all the aircraft in, to recover the hostages and then to get out again safely. Community engagement for something like pitch black is absolutely crucial. Pitch black is a part of Darwin and the territory. I first saw pitch black when I was 12 and I actually was in Darwin with my father on a massive road trip from Melbourne. And that image of aircraft recovering back into land really stuck with me. We love coming up there because of the way we're received. We are looked after like family generally, and we put a lot of effort into things like the open day, and this time the Mindel Beach display is the biggest one we've done. Well, it'd be too early to reveal what's coming for Pitch Black 24. I don't think we'll be seeing an expansion of the scale of Pitch Black. We've really got it to a size now that is very challenging, but is about as much, I think, as we can tackle to make sure that the training is effective and safe.
Thank you for joining us for our Anzac Day commemorations. I'm joined by Major Elizabeth McFarlane and Warrant Officer Class 2 Paul Stiles in the studio here in Darwin today. Look, Elizabeth, we spoke about some of the postings you've had, but sort of a different tact. I believe you're studying a master's degree. Is that something you can do through your job with Defence?
That's correct, Amy. So I've been fortunate enough to be able to conduct part-time study funded through Defence. So it's currently with UNSW. There are lots of opportunities to do further training and study to enhance your job, your trade. And for me, it's a Masters of Strategic People Management. So people being our greatest capability, it's a big passion of mine to be able to learn after hours, at home at night to figure out how we can best enhance the workforce, recruit, retain, and those different strategies, which has been incredible.
So I guess for young people looking at what their career options are, with Defence, having that option to study, have it paid for, you're not coming out with a huge debt at the end of it, I mean, that must be quite an incentive for people.
It's fantastic. There are lots of different opportunities and pathways. Paul's a reservist, I'm full-time, but to go through different, the Defence Force Academy through Duntroon and even through some of the options up here with University and TAFE, there are lots of different funding lines that soldiers and officers can take advantage of.
Now, we talked about how great being posted in Darwin was, not necessarily just with a Darwin focus, but what are the hard parts of the job? What's the hardest part of the work? I guess, Paul, is there anything that's a bit difficult in your role?
So sometimes it is work that is just physically challenging. That's the reality of training for combat operations. So sometimes that physical challenge can be difficult, but I don't see it that way as something that's got hard parts to it. Defence is an organisation that in my experience is the one that has had the strongest commitment to continuous adaptation and change, and the training of people that goes along with that, so that you're always in this environment where you are having these opportunities for new experiences, new learning. It means that the challenges become, for me, I think less of a concern, because you can see the positive trajectory of all of this.
Yeah, so a bit of an ever-evolving situation that you're in, keeping it very interesting. Elizabeth, we mentioned that you had several postings. Is leaving people a tough part of the job, making those connections and friendships and then having to say goodbye?
Yes, that can be tough, but you end up with this incredible network across the country and the globe, really, of people that you've served with over the years, and just to be involved in different communities. So Darwin is extremely welcoming when you arrive. You feel part of the community as a Defence member. It's the same in places like Townsville, Melbourne and Canberra and Sydney, and so we're very fortunate. Yes, we may move a lot, but there are always great opportunities to be involved in the local community.
Well, we're going to look outside of the Northern Territory now, and the Anzac Day tradition began as a way to commemorate Australians killed in World War I. But more than a century on, we're still correcting a great disservice to the thousands of veterans who actually made it home. They later died with little recognition of their sacrifice to the conflict. At cemeteries in towns and cities across Australia, their final resting places remain unmarked. In fact, it's estimated there are more than 12,000 inferior graves across the country. Volunteers have been working on the immense task of restoring them, giving the returned the recognition that they deserve. Reporter Will Murray takes us to Tasmania, where the team is at a crossroads in the mission.
In the quiet town of Oatlands in central Tasmania, members of the armed forces have gathered to commemorate the life of a fellow soldier. But this is no ordinary service.
Before there was just a simple metal cross with G Hardwick painted very rustically, so it's lovely to see that he's finally being recognised as a soldier.
In 1963, Cornelius George Hardwick was buried here at the age of 80. His unadorned grave gave no indication he'd risked his life for his country during the First World War.
The government made the promise to these men when they encouraged them to go away back in 16, 17, 18, that we will look after you when you come home. If you make that kind of promise, and these men expected to be looked after, and they weren't really looked after.
If, like George Hardwick, their death wasn't attributable to their war service, their family received no financial support for a memorial.
He was just one of those who was basically forgotten about.
Andrea and Ron Gerard are members of the Headstone Project, an organisation which seeks to give deceased veterans who ended up in makeshift grave sites their overdue honours. A ceremony like this is thanks to their tireless research, fundraising and labour. Restoring George Hardwick's headstone and hundreds before him began here at Cornelian Bay in Hobart.
There's 9 of us. I think the youngest one's in the mid-50s. Most of them are 70 and above.
The not-for-profit organisation needs to source concrete, tools, labourers and plaques, amongst many other things. Every headstone restoration requires these volunteers to travel hundreds of kilometres. The gravesite needs to be prepared at least a week before the ceremony to ensure both the headstone and the plaque are secure. Over many years of doing this work, the Headstone Project have it all down to a fine art. And while the work is physically taxing, the sad circumstances of these lost soldiers keep the group motivated, determined to leave no one behind. Since 2010, the Headstone Project has restored more than 500 graves in Tasmania alone. At a cost of $750 each, that's a total cost of around $375,000. Now, while this organisation and others like them across the country used to receive government funding, that's no longer the case, and they estimate there are more than 10,000 left to do.
At the moment, we're using whatever reserves we've got, so I've tried to be very careful and keep some money aside.
They're desperate to secure long-term funding before they and the rest of their team become too old to carry on.
We would like to keep the project going, but the age of our volunteers is prohibitive of that.
And if they can't find the money or the volunteers, what happens next?
I don't know. I wouldn't like to think that one.
No, we don't like that thought. But basically, I guess the project will just fold up.
Without them, thousands of soldiers' graves will remain unmarked, their history of service buried with them. 100 years ago, George Hardwick put his life on the line for his country. Finally, the time has come to lay him to rest. Halfway across the world, he witnessed things that we can only imagine. Although the conflict didn't take his life, the lasting effects of World War I shaped the rest of it. He died in a small town with no close family and no recognition of the sacrifice he made.
I'd like to leave a legacy that says that we care, that we're a group of people who try to do something in a positive and in a real way. Why should they miss out when others have got a headstone? They're all heroes for me.
These guys deserve to be remembered.
What an incredible service they're doing. It's great that those unmarked graves are being remembered, isn't it?
It's definitely incredible, Amy. To see that community rally around and actually be able to achieve something of that magnitude is wonderful.
Now, Elizabeth, I think I mentioned 14 years in the ADF now,
correct.
quite a long time. What are some of the more memorable postings that you've had in that time?
This current posting will definitely be up there. Commanding Australian soldiers is a great honour, and there's a lot of trust that comes with that, and so I'm feel very privileged to be given that opportunity up here. I spent a bit of time, I was posted as the aide-de-camp to the Governor-General, so working in the Office of the Official Secretary to the Governor-General was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and those experiences and opportunities that came with that posting was incredible. So
who was the Governor-General at that time?
For General Hurley.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah, so current Governor-General.
Yeah.
So prior to this appointment, I was fortunate enough to spend 12 months in Canberra with Their Excellencies, which was a wonderful opportunity.
That is quite a shift in direction going from Canberra to Darwin.
So, like I said, one career and many jobs, and there's a definite spectrum of those things you can do. So going from that, then being able to command soldiers in the Territory in Darwin has been wonderful.
And on individual events, I believe you were part of the flood response in Townsville, is that
Yes,
right?
that's right. So when I was up at the 3rd Brigade, so the 3rd Combat Signal Regiment there, it was 2019 when the Townsville floods occurred. So we were very active in the response there. It was devastating for so many in the community, but the opportunity for ADF to step up and support during the recovery mission and management for the community. A lot of the ADF members were also affected, so it was a real challenge for a lot of families to balance being at work but also gutting out houses when they had lost everything. So there was a very tough experience, but one that I learnt a lot from.
And I guess when people associate defence, they think of sort of overseas or war postings, but a lot of the job is helping people on the ground here in Australia too.
That's it. And I think it's, commanding soldiers overseas is incredible, but when you're here at home and being able to respond to some natural disasters, which unfortunately there have been quite a few in the last few years, there is no greater honour to wear that uniform and be part of that helping hand for the local community.
And Paul, we did mention the connection with remote communities and with Indigenous defence personnel and getting those Indigenous groups to sign up and serve. Is that a special part of your job, having that connection to country?
It is, Amy, and connection to those soldiers as well. It's been a significant part of my work with Norforce for a long time is to involved in training new soldiers. Now in actually recruiting them as well, and seeing the personal development of those young people, particularly if they've lived a really strong traditional life in a very remote place, and we're bringing them into a really deep immersion into a very different culture, not just different from mainstream Australia that you and I may have experienced, but different even within that, service within the Australian Defence Force. And to see them arrive uncertain and a little scared and gain confidence and a sense of empowerment about their own skills and ability over a relatively short period of time is a really moving experience.
Well, I can't thank you enough. We have run out of time, but thank you so much for your time this morning and for your expertise. It's been so wonderful speaking to you both. This does bring our Anzac Day broadcast to an end. A huge thank you to everyone who joined us on the ABC for the street parade and other commemorations, and a big thank you, of course, to Warrant Officer Class 2 Paul Stiles and Major Elizabeth McFarlane for coming in today. Thank you for your company. Have a great Anzac Day.